Hi guys, hello. Can you all hear me clearly? Wait for a couple of minutes for people to join in. I'll be reviewing the third slot, or so to say, the first slot of day two of CET 2020. So I'll just wait for some time. Let few more people to join in. In the meantime, if you guys can just let me know if you're able to hear me clearly, and also tell me how many have a few yeses. I'm not able to understand if whether I'm audible or not. So if you can just let me know, 45 minutes from my place. Went there at the reporting time, which was 9:15, and the paper started at about 10 o'clock. So as you might be aware, there's a 10-minute window before your paper actually starts. So there's that instruction thing that goes on, so something that you can read for 10 minutes, and then you actually start the paper. So the paper started on time. There were no technical glitches, at least at my center. So the students had in my lab at least. So the yeah. So I can see a few comments right now. Somebody's asking whether the paper was tough. So categorizing it as overall as a tough paper would be a little difficult. So I'll be breaking it down section by section. Khushi is saying that LR was very tough and it was tough. So let's get started with the sections. I'll start with I'll struggled making say 30, 40 or 50 attempts in the LR section. So a sound strategy was to focus on the other three areas. So this was something which was evident from yesterday's analysis. So I started with the abstract reasoning section because I liking it in the beginning, and I'm telling this in a lot of my other videos as well, and to my students. You start with something which so that you can catch the momentum. So I started with the abstract reasoning section. It felt as a breeze. I mean, there was nothing which was difficult in the abstract reasoning section as such. I found it to be very straightforward. The number of questions or the composition of the questions in the section didn't change compared to what it was yesterday. So you had questions which are on series. So it will be the next figure in the series. There were some questions where one of the figures in the middle was also missed. There were questions on analogies. So quite a few questions were there on analogies as well. But overall, you guys, it to be a fairly simple, straightforward kind of a section. What I felt was there were some questions which were a little difficult because of the number of elements which were present. So there were about 6, 9 elements present in each of the figures. And then tracking the movement of those figures, those images could have been a little difficult. But overall, you can categorize it to be an easy section, the way it was on day one as well. And a genuine attempt of 20 plus in this section could have been managed easily in about 25 minutes or so. So out of 25, I'm saying all of you should have attempted all 25 questions, of course, because there's no negative marking. But then a genuine attempt of 20 or slightly more than that with 80 to 90% accuracy is a good attempt, so to say. From there on, I decided to move to the content section. Though initially, when I went for the paper, I was thinking that I should attempt verbal section because I read it that it was easier. Uh, but something made me start with quant. So after I was done with abstract, I moved to the quant section. In the quant section, there was on geometry or mentioned in the entire paper. So there's only one question, if I recall correctly, on the volume of cylinder, which is recasted into some other cylinder, and you have to find some question based on that. But apart from that, there's complete absence of geometry. A lot of questions on numbers, so calculation-based questions such as BODMAS. There are questions, so within mathematics or the quantitative section, what the only thing that I found which was pretty different compared to other exams or CET earlier as well was in a lot of questions you had values which were not rounded off. For example, there's a question where I recall that the discount was not 15%, the discount was given something like a 15.03%. And based on that, you had to calculate. So though the paper was easy because this rounding off that every time you had to do, some people would have struggled with these questions. But the options which were given you were pretty far from each other. And that even if you, let's say, had rounded it off to the closest integral value, you would have still got the correct answer. So overall, not very difficult. But then this thing of rounding off could have thrown a few people off guard. Coming to the DI section, so there was one caselet which was on cricket, chess, and tennis players in 3 academies. though it required you to infer a lot of information. So there was information given as the ratio between chess and cricket is 2:1, or the ratio between cricket and tennis is whatever 2:3, and so on. And the total number was given in some cases. So if you had worked around it pretty quickly, you would have got what exactly was required, and that wasn't a difficult thing, but could have been avoided as the first attempt. So what one could have done was maybe do all the quant questions, which are standalone quant questions, including quantitative comparison questions, which were fairly straightforward, and then maybe move to DI. The table question, which was there in DI in terms of the male-female split and the fines imposed, was again a fairly straightforward question, a simple application of ratios. I had one bar chart slot, and that was on input-output. So percentage efficiency of either 5 or 6 companies or divisions of the company was given. So I didn't really read the initial instructions. I just questions. You had questions which were direct also, which had, say, things like probability involved in it, and you also had questions wherein algebra was involved. So x and y, where quadratic equations are given, and you have to compare between the value of x and y. Overall, again, the questions can't be categorized as difficult. I would say easy to moderate questions. Some people tend to struggle with the quadratic comparison kind of questions, but overall, I think it was pretty smooth. Uh, a decent candidate out of 50 could have easily around 35 to 40 questions, if not more, with at least 80-85% accuracy. So a good attempt in my view, so would be around 40. So 35 to 40 out of 50 is a very good attempt to have. Because there's hardly any margin for error. A lot of questions where most of the questions was direct. So you apply the formula and you get to the answer. So except maybe 4 or 5 questions which could have been difficult. Otherwise, any specific comments? Ramit saying it seems slot 1 was the easiest of all slots. Will there be normalization? So I'll come to the normalization part later. Okay, so I'll now move to the verbal section or the VARC section. So after I finished quant, so what I attempted all the standard quant questions, then I actually did, and then I came back to quant section and did the DI part. So that was the strategy that I followed because I felt very straightforward. So I got some momentum by solving, then I moved to the verbal section. So starting with the verbals, if you have gone through the analysis of the yesterday or the day 1, slot 1, as well as is that new question types. So there was a question wherein the fragments of the sentences were given. So you had one column which is A, B, C, the other column which is D, E, F. And within that, there are 3 parts given. So in some cases, you might have to rearrange those parts to form a grammatically coherent sentence. In some cases, that was not required. So there were questions based on that. The first column was fixed, the second column was variable. So you had to do match the kind of thing. But it also had the element of actually rearranging the fragments and also making sure whether it makes sense or not. So that way, this was a new question type, but people who had read it were expecting it. I was expecting that question type to appear. So the instruction, some comments on VARC section, how you guys found it. You can let me know what were the attempts like. How many questions were you able to attempt genuinely? B, only C and A, and that kind of thing. It was slightly difficult in the beginning for a lot of people to get adjusted to this kind. So yeah, coming to then I moved to, so once I did all the verbal questions and the grammar-based questions, I moved to RCs, and there are 15 questions. I also had a closed test passage in my case, where we had to do fill in the blanks. Again, the words were not that difficult, but there were options which were like that all the words can also be replaced, or they can be there at the place of fill in the blank, or none of the words could be applied. So the options made it slightly difficult rather than the question itself. So the passage was very easy to read, but the questions, some people might have found the option structure a little difficult. Coming to RCs again, not very difficult to read. So there was one RC wherein they had only given as paragraph A, B, and C. And in the questions, they had referred to it as, say, in this paragraph. So in paragraph B, what the author is saying, or in paragraph C, what the author is saying, entire RC, and decided to read the questions first. That person still could have managed it, because if you read the question, it says go to paragraph 2, then you know that you have to go to paragraph 2. But the questions, the RC itself wasn't very difficult to read. So there was one which was on the environmental impact of large corporations, and the steps that are being taken by, there's a group of investors which is trying to sort of take some initiatives, and they want the companies to work on those initiatives. So that RC was pretty straightforward. So overall, I would categorize it as a easy section, but then because of the new question types, some people would have struggled a little bit. So that's why overall, let's put it as easy to moderate. And overall, I believe out of 50, one could have attempted, say, 40 odd questions with a decent accuracy of, I would say, 85 to 90%. Okay. So that's it about the VRC section. Now I'll start with the logical reasoning section. If you can just tell me how many attempts you guys had. Yeah, if I can get a few comments on the attempts in the LR section. I hope I'm audible because there's some technical issue in between. Yeah. Hi guys. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so I can see some people saying 40 odd attempts in the LR section. So that's a fairly good attempt, I would say. So, as I told you, the order in which I went about the paper was I started with the abstract, did of quant, then did the entire VRC, and came back to quant to do the DI questions. So, in about 90 minutes or so, I was done with these three sections. So, around 125 attempts is what I had when the clock hit 90 minutes. But what happened after that is a story that I don't want to share. So, I started with the section. As expected, the case have been attempted. There was no input-output question. So I was surprised to see input-output there. But otherwise, the arrangement questions, when I read it for the first time, I found it to be insanely difficult. And there was no one set where I could focus on that, okay, this looks easy. Because most of them had length of an RC passage, except a few questions. So I think there was one which was on circular arrangement, where 8 people are sitting and have blood relations. So that was one. The other, which I felt was doable, was the one on 7 cars, and the speed was given, and there were 7 people who own these cars. So these two are the sections where I felt that I could actually solve it, and I should. So, but I decided at that point of time that it looked extremely lengthy and difficult. So let's not touch it. Let's go to all the non-arrangement questions. So then I started with the input-output. I solved that one. And then all the logic based questions, so standalone puzzles that you had, were fairly doable. So whether it was there was one question which was on reverse coding, so which of the following is the odd one out. There was letters, so set of 4 letters was given and you had to figure out the odd one. That was extremely simple. One question which was on if I recall correctly, there was one question which was on blood relations, and even there was one on calendars, which was fairly straightforward. So apart from these small logic puzzles Stan had, overall I felt the paper to be extremely lengthy. So though I tried it didn't work out. So I focused on the reasoning part, which, so whether it was inference and conclusion, strengthening, weakening arguments, those questions were doable. So I tried completing all those questions first, but because critical reasoning requires you to read it carefully, there was some time that was spent in it. So a good strategy, I believe, in something like this. So considering the nature of CET over the last few years and the CET that, so out of 75, there were 6 sets of 6 questions each. So that is 36 questions gone. Uh, a good strategy was to not touch these 36 questions in the first half of your attempt. So one could have attempted the remaining questions and then come to arrangement questions and tried solving maybe 1 or 2 caselets if possible. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, I believe it will be similar the way I had. So people would not be able to attempt, say, more than 40-45 questions in LR sections. A good attempt, I would say, is 45 to 50, taking everything into consideration. So one could have easily left out 4 caselets out of the 6 caselets that were there. So one could have tried to, but then your question selection matters. So if you've selected the set and you crack it in the first go, then great. But if you start it and then you get stuck, then you have a problem. So I happened to talk to a few people. Test was done. So at Mentor, there were a few students extremely lengthy. Strategy, as I said, attend all the non-caselet questions and then move to caselets. But otherwise, critical reasoning or other question types which are there were fairly standard and straightforward. So overall, I would say moderate to difficult is how I'm going to classify it. The non-caselet questions were easy to moderate, but the caselets were difficult. So overall, let's put it as moderate to difficult section. Yeah, so I'll go to chat now in case there are any questions. Yeah. So I'll just go through the comments which are there in chat. Yeah, unfortunately, the live chat is facing some problems, so I'll have to pop out chat and just go through your comments and then again come back. Okay, so I'll go through the questions. Somebody saying I had only LR sets. That's not true. You had LR sets, but you also had other things. But a sound strategy was to not touch those arrangement-based questions. 2 puzzles easy, 4 moderate to difficult. I agree. So 2 puzzles, though I would not classify them as easy, because even there you had to read a lot of things to sort of crack those. But then better was to do other questions and then come back to these. But great, if you're able to crack, I think 2 puzzles, and that's a fairly good attempt, is what I would say. Sachin is saying overall lengthy paper. Completely agree. Abstract reasoning was time consuming, but easy. Yes, that's what I had mentioned as well. So somebody asking what is the ideal attempt for JB and at what accuracy? So considering that one could have attempted the other, barring L, one could have easily all other 3 sections, which is 125. I'm hoping that somebody would have got, let's say, 80, 85. 85% is something that one could have attempted in terms of accuracy. So that will take you to somewhere around 100, 105 or slightly more if your some of the random markings that you've done is correct. Sort of 125, say somewhere around 105 to 110 is what one can look at. Out of the LR questions that were there, so 75 questions, let's keep aside the 36 questions which were the arrangements, or let's say let's keep 40 aside. The other 35 questions one could have attempted. So let's say out of those 30, somebody hits something around 25, let's say. So 105 already at 130, the difficulty varies a little bit. And that is why it's very difficult to pinpoint and say that this will be the cutoff. So I'm saying in between a 145 to 148, very good shot. But 143 to 145 is something that looks good in my view. But of course, there's one more slot to go, and there's normalization as well, something that we have no clarity on at this point of time. So keeping everything in mind, I think a good attempt in this paper with 80-85% accuracy would be somewhere in the range of 160 to 170 odd questions. Somebody who's a JB aspirant is definitely looking at that kind of an attempt. So yesterday also I happened to talk to a few students and who were sort of in contention for JB because of their performance in the sim series. So these people, keeping that in mind, I would say even in this slot, one could have attempted to view where few A's are B's or only few A's are B's. So the interpretation of that was a little difficult. But then if you understand that only few means less than 50%. So if you're drawing the Venn of it, make sure it has less than 50% and then try and solve it. So because they're saying few. At the same time, also think of other cases, because a lot of times people tend to miss that. So when you're solving syllogisms, important thing is to get all the cases properly. If you get the cases correct, then I think it's generally a straightforward thing. But syllogism, out of 5 questions, I think one could have easily got maybe 3 or 4 correct in my. Okay. Apart from circular and car speed puzzle, all other were extremely data heavy. Yeah. So there was one which I felt I didn't realize whether it is RC or LR caselet. So I just had a cursory glance and I was like that I'm not going to solve this. Okay, LR, somebody is saying I attempted 40 genuine, but could have done more maybe. I think that is always the case, no matter what exam you take. You always feel that you could have done a little more. But yeah, that's how it is. Right? Cutoffs, as I said, for GB, considering it was 45, the day one to difficulty, it's going to be in the same range. So around 145, 147. So either it will go up a little bit or it will come a little bit depending on the day two slot two goes. In the verbal section. We have not had such instances in the past, and that is where we predict some of these things. So whatever we have, we work with that. So if you, but again, if you understand, the core of it was grammar, and we have done enough practice of grammar questions, whether it was through MCETs or through the material that we have. So I understand that the fact that there were some surprises, but as I said, some surprise there's a that we can't really predict. Would be happy to answer. Malak is asking if I can repeat the level of difficulty classification of all the sections. Yes. So easy to moderate. When it comes to ARC, again, easy to moderate. But when it comes to LR as overall section, moderate to difficult. In terms of cutoffs, so some people had asked about cutoffs. See, on IMS website also you have cutoffs of all the colleges through CET. So the last year's cutoffs are updated. What you can also do is you can go to the DT's website or the CET cell website and go through 2019-20 data. And there you will find cutoffs of CAP 1, 3 for each of these institutes. So at this point of time, don't worry about cutoffs. Just focus on the test that is there. I hope all of you had a good attempt, and we'll wait for 2 weeks in which the result is going to be out. And once the result is out, we'll have better clarity in terms of what the cutoffs are going to be. So if let's say the slot 2 today comes out to be easier, it will have some impact on cutoffs. So let's understand once we have the data of all the, and of course we'll predict the cutoff, but the each of these institutes, how it will move at 1 to 2 to 3, all those things will normalization. We don't really know exactly whether they do normalize, or if they do, how they do it, because all the scores that are reported are real values. So if there is normalization, generally, for example, when it happens in CATs of the slots, how much is expected in VS out of 50? I would say 40 plus is a very good attempt with 80-85% accuracy. All of you were able to do justice to the paper. I'm very happy compared to what it. Okay, so that's it from my side. I wish you guys all the best for the result, and I hope that you guys get into the college of your choice. So there will be an official review of day one as well as day two. Okay, so just go through the review which is there on the website. If you have any questions, please feel free to get back. Okay, wish you guys all the best. Thank you.